Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the program. It is the Tuesday edition of the Big Radio Show. I know you thought I was going to say Monday, but it's Tuesday, and we are ready to rock and roll. Thank you, and apologies for not highlighting the fact that I was going to be off the air yesterday. It was kind of a last-minute decision, and it had to do with, a lot of things that were happening here around the station and some family stuff, and the fact that some of my clients were going to be closed yesterday, so I thought, why not? And I will say I slept in embarrassingly late yesterday. I felt so good. It was amazing. It was amazing. And I'm just so happy to be here today. Tuesday, of course, means that it is Brad Keithley and the weekly top three. Doomsday, as Kim says in the chat room. No, I don't think it's doom. I just think it's truth. It's a hard truth. It's Truth Tuesdays. And that's what we're all about. We're going to be joined by Brad here in just a hot second. And then, of course, as always, we'll finish up our Tuesday with Chris Story, the man from Homer, who comes in to give us a little bit of positivity because we're going to need it by the time we get there, I'm sure, to be pumped back up and ready to go. Later on this week, I have no idea what we're going to do. I know that we're going to be talking with, I think, George Rauscher on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. And I know Ben Carpenter's coming in on Thursday as well. So we'll see where we go from here. But before we get any further along, let's just jump into it and get Brad Keithley with us here from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, and we'll get ready for the weekly top three. Good morning, Brad. How are you this morning?
Michael, I'm doing great today. It must be tough. I know we originally scheduled this on Tuesday, so it wouldn't be this thing out of the bag, out of the bag on Monday. But it must be tough to do this on the first day of the week.
You know, it's not too bad. I don't mind it too much, but for some people, I'm sure it'll be like taking a sip from a fire hose. It's just going to blow your lips back. That's it should be interesting. So anyway, Brad, I do want to get started because there's a lot of things that have been going on this last few days, including the whole thing on the PFD and new information on how the permanent fund is performing and everything else. So let's just get started. Let's talk here, number one, about what's really happening with the permanent fund dividend, because the legislature decided in their infinite wisdom, the finance committee in the House, to just zero it out. And they've decided that just makes it easier. Although I had to laugh at Andy Josephson, his comment in this whole thing. Yeah, he's like, don't worry, I'm sure we'll have a PFD, But what was interesting to me was his quote that says, what constrains us in what they want to spend on? What constrains us is public perception and desire for a dividend. I mean, he admits the quiet part out loud. That's what held back their spending, is that people expect and want a dividend, and that just constrains them. Anyway, I'll let you go here.
Poor them. And Andy can't win. Last year, I mean, this whole thing is a reaction to what happened last year. Last year, he put the full dividend into the first draft of the House Finance Committee, House Finance Committee draft of the budget. Put the full PFD in as the governor had proposed, and that caused them all sorts of problems. Particularly because Neil Foster, who's a co-chair of House Finance, has committed in repeated campaigns up in his district not to vote against a full PFD. When he has a chance to vote for a full PFD, he says he will do it. Now, there's a lot of caveats that he's worked in over the years, but that's sort of a standard that's come to be expected of him in his district. So last year, Andy put the full PFD in the budget, fully expecting that they would amend it at some point and return it down to lower levels, and that would be easy. The problem was for him last year was that the House Finance Committee is divided so tightly that he couldn't afford to lose Neil's vote. Neil wouldn't vote for an amendment that would reduce the PFD down below the full PFD. So they ultimately had to deal with that. They ultimately passed out if I recall correctly, a House Finance, a full PFD in the budget, and then had to vote it down had to reduce it on the floor when they didn't need Neil's vote. It is so Andy, in response to that box that he put himself in last year, decided to go the another way this year and not put the PFD in at all. That way, what Neil's voting on is Neil's voting to increase the PFD from what's in the House budget.
Makes him a hero. Now I voted for something
at any given point in time. But there's something else that's going on here. I mean, so Andy's claim is what he did was he used the adjusted base budget as what he's got in House Finance. But the adjusted base budget has $1,000 PFD. It has whatever last year's PFD was in it when you look at what the typical adjusted base budget is. So he made an exception. He used the adjusted base budget with the exception that he zeroed out the PFD when he put it in. And I think what's going on is that they want to spend more. I mean, if you look around at the various hearings and the various statements that are being made, the House leadership has made a commitment to doing a defined benefits bill this year, and they said they think they can get it through the Senate, and they're going to push hard for it. So they need to create space for that. There a number of House majority members are saying they need to increase school spending even more, both on the operational side as well as on the capital side, because they have now all these stories of schools falling apart, and they need to increase capital spending for the schools, and so they need to create space for that. And you sort of start looking around, and there's various additional spending categories that they want to do. So I think what they're doing is they're starting out with a zero PFD so they can layer in all this additional spending. And then at the end, after they've layered in all the additional spending, without having to say they're cutting the PFD, because they've set the PFD at zero, without having to say they're cutting the PFD, they've layered in all this additional spending. And so at the end, they will have some PFD, won't be much, but they'll have some PFD, but they've created the space to layer in all the additional spending while they're going forward. Some members are putting a lot of stress on the way that the House Finance budget is constructed, where it says there's a surplus. The House Finance budget actually says there's a surplus, and the surplus is the amount that was in the adjusted base for the PFD that's no longer there because they took it out. And so when you look at the budget, it's actually showing a surplus. And so House Finance members are saying, oh, there's a surplus, or House Majority members are saying, oh, there's a surplus. Look at the budget. There's a surplus. And so since there's a surplus, we need to be spending it on this. We need to be spending it on that. And I think there's a chance it's going to come back to haunt them because they're creating all these expectations and allowing their members to create all these expectations that they're going to have additional spending in these various categories. And they're going to try to fit it in the House finance budget because there's a surplus. And then at the end, when they have to deal with the PFD, they're going to put themselves at risk of running out of room for dealing with the PFD. So Andy's gone from one extreme last year that put him in a box to another extreme this year that threatens to put him in a box. But it's interesting to, I mean, as a watcher of the process, it's interesting to see how, there is a standard that you could just use, which would be last year's adjusted base, and it would be defensible because that's, if you're going to use an adjusted base budget as your starting point, that would have the $1,000 PFD. You put it in there. Yeah. And so it's just really, it's a interesting situation that the House is putting themselves in. But I think they're really trying to create room to stack additional spending on without saying they're cutting the PFD to do it. Right. They're just going to say, look, we had to put on this additional spending in. It's needed for the state, and this is the amount left over at the end of all that.
Well, and I think people are seeing that, including Will Stapp, who's no fan of the PFD. He said he's concerned that the majority members will use that budget surplus as the basis for adding more spending on state services to the budget. He said, quote, "When I hear the co-chair of finance talking about all this that he's going to spend money on and he deposits the entirety of the PFD into the general fund, that makes me think they're not taking this deficit very seriously at the moment. I'm not super optimistic at the moment that they're going to have downward pressure on the budget. No, of course not. I mean, that's the whole point. The party has to continue, Brad. The spending party has to continue no matter what. That's the whole point. There is no deficit. There is no crisis. The spending must continue until the world implodes.
Yeah, it's. I think Stapp's got that right. They are trying to create the impression that they've got room for needed additional spending, like the defined benefits program and like the increased education spending they want to do. They've got room for this needed additional spending without having to go to taxes. It's not the Democrats that's pushing you into taxes. They would say we have additional room in the budget for this needed spending, and so they're trying to create this impression. But somebody needs to exercise a lot of restraint on what they finally try to layer in the House finance budget. They're going to find at the end of the day, they put themselves in a world of hurt by creating all these expectations for additional spending and finding out, in March when they do the spring revenue forecast, oops, oil prices have slipped even further. Revenues have slipped even further. And we just don't have room for any of it.
Right. Well, and of course, on the revenue side, they've completely poo-pooed and declined to engage with the governor's bill at all. And in fact, instead, they've got a new combination education and flat tax idea for education that they're going to put in. They've taken all the stuff from last year's discussion on oil taxation, and they're going to take that. So no broad-based revenue. It's going to be everybody's going to have to pay a chunk of money every year for education, and the oil companies are going to get some of their stuff in there, which is I'm not opposed to per se, but it still doesn't address the long-term revenue issues that we have going on.
Right. Senate Resources yesterday, Kathy Giesel put forward some amendments to the governor's bill that would substitute in a bunch of revenue items, particularly on the oil side, and added a really bizarre, what she calls an education head tax, but which is the tax, the level of the tax adjusts upward depending upon your income status. It's a mess. It doesn't raise much revenue, and it's a mess to try to think how you're going to administer that. But yeah, they've got some proposals coming on the revenue side, but not nearly the level of proposals needed to balance the deficit that the state's facing. They're not taking it seriously.
No, it's not. And again, anything to keep the party going. which is what they're looking at right now, and that's kind of where we're at. That brings us up to the end of number 1. That was quick. Let's get into number 2 in just a moment. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues right after this. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break. Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Did you catch the editorial piece there in the ADN, the Binkley family blog?
Yeah, against the defined pension.
Yeah, against the defined benefits. I guess even a stop clock can be right once a day or twice a day. Yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to show they're conservatives. I mean, they're trying to show that they're concerned about spending. They don't mind raising revenues in a very top 20% fashion, protective fashion, but that spending side, you want to be careful about that spending side.
Yeah, no, I thought that was an interesting conundrum based on all their other recent op-eds that they'd had out there. I was like, well, wait a second, I thought you were all for this kind of stuff. Brad, what is this? When you look at this, what do you see in this? Because I mean, I see people who are completely unserious about the crisis that's looming ahead of us, because this is not just a this year crisis. This is an ongoing crisis, and they seem to have absolutely no qualms about just continuing the games.
Yeah, I think what it strikes me is they're all short-term. It's all short-term plays. None of the. I mean, the governor's proposal, I think, was a long-term solution. But I think what the legislature is doing is just a bunch of short-term plays. I mean, basically what Andy's maneuver on the PFD, Andy Josephson maneuver on the PFD is to create space to the appearance of space on a short-term basis to justify additional spending. But what that's going to do is just raise spending expectations further. I mean, once you start a program, or once you kick in a program, or once you kick in additional spending, you create constituencies around that additional spending that then dig in their heels if you try to cut it later on. And I think what he's doing is he's trying to create space to layer on this additional spending that they want to do this year by saying, oh, we got a surplus, by eliminating the PFD and saying, oh, we got a surplus. But it's not a long-term solution. It's adding to your long-term problem by layering in additional spending and additional constituencies built around that additional spending. I don't see anybody serious other than the governor's proposal. I don't think I see anybody serious trying to get to a long-term solution. And they said in response to the governor's proposal, the House leadership initially said, oh, we'll get to it next year. No, they won't. It'll be another short-term fix next year. Somebody at some point, and the fiscal policy working group in 2021 did that. At some point, somebody's got to sit down and say, look, we need to create a long-term plan here. Fiscal policy working group did that, and the leadership on both the Senate and the House side didn't give them the time of day with respect to that plan. So it's just one. They're scrambling. I mean, Andy's proposal to eliminate the PFD and create this so-called space for additional spending this year is just another, short-term scramble to try to get through another year, get to another election, get another 2 years or another 4 years or whatever anybody's running for in their pocket. And then we'll get to it down the road.
Yeah. No, I mean, Rob says it right here. We're still concentrating on the 1 year budget cycle and the 2 year election cycle, not the long-term economic cycle. Right. And that's exactly it. I mean, they're looking, how can we get this through to next year and kick the can down the road just a little further? But again, as we've said, There's not a lot of road left. If they create all this space for this additional $800 million, and then they spend half of it or more on an ongoing basis, because this is not one-time spending.
Yeah, exactly.
This is all permanent spending. That's the problem. All right, 25 seconds here before we rejoin the radio. Brad Keithley is our guest. Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Don't forget to check Brad out at ak4sb.com or go over to X or wherever he likes to fight on. You can fight him over there all you want. Let's get to it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Don't forget also to check us out on Spotify. For those of you who want to catch the podcast later on, that's the place to go. Here we go. Let's do it.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, continuing on, the weekly top 3 continues. And we're going to take a peek now inside the Permanent Fund Corporation with number 2 of the weekly top 3. Brad, what's happening with the Permanent Fund? It's showing why they are trying to create this back door, right? I mean, it gives us some great insight into what's happening here.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot on the show about the proposal to consolidate the current constitutionally created 2-account permanent fund system that has the corpus in one account and the earnings reserve in the second account, to consolidate those 2 accounts together. And the proposal made by the Permanent Fund Corporation board and others to bring those 2 accounts together. The concern we and others have raised is that what that creates is an opportunity for a backdoor into the corpus. The proposed constitutional amendment would say that the legislature could draw 5% per year from this combined account in perpetuity, and regardless of what the Permanent Fund Corporation is earning. So if the Permanent Fund Corporation is earning 7.5% real after inflation, if the Permanent Fund Corporation is earning 7.5%, that's all fine and dandy, because you're drawing out 5%. The Permanent Fund Corporation is putting in 7.5%. So the Permanent Fund corpus is actually growing by 2.5% in that situation. But if you're drawing out 5% and the Permanent Fund Corporation is only earning 4%, then you got a problem, because you're taking out more than the Permanent Fund Corporation is putting back in terms of real earnings. And the result of that is, adjusted for inflation, the permanent fund is declining over time. We've said that basically what that does, the consolidation of the 2 accounts with the constitutional 5% draw, what that does is create a back door into the corpus by allowing the permanent fund, by allowing the withdrawal of more money than could be withdrawn under the old 2-account system because of the limitations of the earnings reserve. The earnings reserve has what the earnings are. If you don't earn enough, then you're automatically stopped from drawing any more because the earnings reserve doesn't have any additional money. It's the ultimate protection of the corpus. But the consolidation of the 2 accounts would allow the legislature essentially to start drawing from the corpus in situations where the Permanent Fund Corporation isn't earning 5% return. Into that mix, this past week, the Permanent Fund Corporation made its annual presentation to the legislature about what's going on with the Permanent Fund Corporation and the Permanent Fund. And there was one slide that just really caught my eye. This slide is in the middle of the Permanent Fund Corporation's presentation. And it is talking about the various asset categories into which they've made investments: public equity, fixed income, private equity, and so forth. Those on the left-hand side, those are the categories, those are the buckets into which the Permanent Fund is investing. And on the right-hand side is Callan Associates. This is the financial advisor. One of the financial advisors the Permanent Fund Corporation uses to project forward how the fund's going to do, is Callan Associates forecasted 10-year return on all of these buckets that the permanent fund is going to invest in. And you go down to the bottom. So they have the projected return by category, by private equity, global opportunities, tactical opportunities, and so forth. You go down to the bottom, they have the projected, the portfolio, all of the categories together, projected nominal return at 7.3%. And then Callan's forecast of projected inflation, because you're trying to get to the real return, the after inflation return that the permanent fund is going to be earning. And it projects a portfolio projected real return after inflation return of 4.8. So if and this is over a 10-year period. So if the legislature is going to be withdrawing 5% per year, and the permanent fund is only going to be earning 4.8 per year, you can begin to see a little bit of a problem. You can begin to see the fact that there aren't going to be enough earnings being generated by the permanent fund to support the withdrawal. And so where's the additional 0.2% in this scenario, in this projected scenario? Where's the additional 0.2% going to come from? Well, it's going to have to come from the permanent fund corpus, because the legislature is going to continue to be entitled to make this 5% withdrawal from the permanent fund. The Permanent Fund Corporation is only injecting 4.8% return into the permanent fund per year, and the extra 2.2% is going to have to come out of the permanent fund. This proves, I mean, it's sort of odd to see it come from the Permanent Fund Corporation, but this proves the very point we've been trying to make, that there are scenarios, indeed the scenario that the Permanent Fund Corporation's own advisors are telling it to expect in the next 10 years, that there are scenarios in which the Permanent Fund Corporation isn't going to earn a sufficient amount to generate enough earnings to fund what the legislature is going to be taking out of the fund. It was eye-opening to see that, and it proves the very scenario that we've been claiming. And some say, some have responded, "Oh, that can't happen." Well, the Permanent Fund Corporation is now telling you it can happen.
Yeah. Well, of course, they would say, "Oh, but we would never draw 5 when there's only a 4.8. We would never draw 5." Of course, what they would say is, then they would say, "Oh, no, the return was 7.3." They would never talk about the real return. They would focus on a true number, but not the true number in the case of what really matters. That's how they would do it, right? I mean, that's the spin that you would hear on this, and they would draw the full 5%. That would be my prediction.
Well, then they're not inflation proofing the fund. I mean, everybody talks about inflation proofing the fund. And so what that 4.8 is the after inflation number, after you've inflation proofed. The 2.5% is a projection of what you need out of the earnings, out of that earnings stream, that 7.3% earnings stream. The 2.5 is what you need to inflation proof the fund, which I think everybody says is important. If you draw 5 and you said, "Oh, we can do that because we got a 7.3 return," what you're shorting in that situation then is inflation proofing. You're not keeping the corpus whole against inflation. So it's just, I mean, the 4.8 number, the 4.8 number is the number that corresponds to the 5% that the legislature says they want to draw, that they want to set in stone in the Constitution, that they can draw out of the permanent fund. And what this is saying is that the Permanent Fund Corporation projects they're only going to put 4.8% in. I've heard one defense of this that's interesting. The defense is this. The defense is, look, the 5% again is against the average balance of the previous 5 years. And so pulling 5% against the balance of the previous 5 years is less than in the year in which you're pulling it. It's less than 5%. You're not pulling 5% of the balance of the fund in that year. You're pulling 5% of the average balance over the preceding 5 years. And so that may be 4.3, it may be 4.5, it may be 4.7, but it's not 5. What that assumes, though, That assumes that you have an ever increasing balance in the permanent fund. If you have a decreasing balance over the preceding 5 years, or a level balance over the preceding 5 years, then the 5% draw is, in the case of a level balance, is pulling 5% of the current balance. And in the case of a declining balance in the permanent fund, you're pulling more than 5%. By pulling the 5% average over the preceding 5 years in the declining situation, the
Right.
average is going to be more than the balance of the fund in the year in which you make the draw. So that works in some scenarios, but it doesn't work in all scenarios. And here's the point: we're putting this in the Constitution. I mean, it's not like we can say in any given year, oops, well, look, we had declining balances. We really can't pull out 5% because we'd be pulling 5.1 or 5.2 or 5.3. And that's more than earnings. So we really have to adjust it back to the earnings. We're putting this in the Constitution. And the Constitution says the legislature can pull 5%. And every legislature, we've built up spending expectations in a way that every legislature is going to pull the 5% to meet the spending expectations they've created. So if you've got scenarios in which you're going to be pulling more than earnings, and that's exactly what this says. If you've got scenarios in which you're going to be pulling more than earnings, you're creating a backdoor into the corpus. And there's really not a good way. There's not a way of arguing against that. That's exactly what you're doing. And now the Permanent Fund Corporation itself is telling us that, yes, not only are there scenarios in which that occurs, we expect that scenario to occur over the next 10 years.
And of course, the one thing that we said where this could be palatable would be if you put a rider in there that said 5% or whatever the average return is over the last 5 years. And I floated that with a couple of people, and I started to get pushback like immediately, which immediately said to me, well, that's what they're going for then. They want that 5% regardless of what's happening. There is no, but we should plan for the worst case. No, we're going to take 5% and we're not going to put that into the constitutional amendment.
Yeah, they've created a scenario in which we've built spending expectations on the continuation of that 5%. And so any given year in which the return might be 4.5%, the average return over the previous 5 years might be 4.5%, and you'd have to lower that down to 4.5%, lower the drawdown to 4.5%. Oh my God, the world's coming to an end because we don't have enough to fund all the spending expectations we've created. So yeah, Rob has said this, you have said that. Yeah, you're exactly correct. This constitutional amendment is to protect the spend. It's to protect the generating enough revenue to maintain the spending at the levels to which we are creating it over time. This amendment isn't to protect the fund. It isn't to protect the corpus of the fund for future generations. It's to protect the spend for current generations. And in that sense, it is just a continuation. It is the latest continuation of, first we're going to drain the SBR, then we're going to drain the CBR, then we're going to come for the permanent fund dividend and start to drain that down. And oh my gosh, we're about to run out of it. So now we're going to start draining the permanent fund itself through creating this back door of the mandatory 5% of the enabled 5% draw, regardless of the earnings that the permanent fund is generating.
And I'm seeing more and more people start to embrace this idea. In fact, Shelley just said in the chat room, she said Dave Bronson and Josh Church had a lot to say about this last night at their Fairbanks and North Pole events. They support combining the principal with the earnings. I think there's a lot of Republicans who are coming on board to say, oh, this is a great thing. Again, not looking at the history of what this legislature and past legislatures have done, which is always the number one rule. It's like Fight Club. You don't talk about it, but the number one rule is protect the spend. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. But the permanent, the thing, and I'm going to write about this on Friday, the thing that the Permanent Fund Corporation itself has given us now is a scenario in which their expected scenario in which they're not going to generate enough earnings in order to support the 5% draw. And, and if people vote for and approve the constitutional amendment and then vote for the constitutional amendment, it's not the end of the Permanent Fund Corp. It's not the end of the Permanent Fund in the next 5 years or 10 years, but it's certainly, we have opened the door to the beginning of the end of the Permanent Fund. And just like the SBR, CBR, and the Permanent Fund dividend, we will drain down the Permanent Fund, and future generations will look back and say, what the hell were those guys doing?
Well, and again, it becomes even a bigger problem because it's a self-reinforcing doom loop, right? They start eating into the seed corn, which creates less revenue, which creates more pressure to keep that draw at 5%, which in turn eats more of the, which again, it's that self-reinforcing doom loop that we talk about. That's exactly what's going on. And once you've strangled the golden goose, well, then what's going to happen, right?
Yeah,
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Back with more right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
We can already see where this is going. All right. We can already see that and Brad is not going to get into this today, but I had to chuckle because, in talking about Kathy Giesel's new income-based education head tax and everything else, she said it, folks. She finally said it. Remember what I said? That once the PFD's gone, what are they going to come back to us and say? They're going to say, oh, it's time for you Alaskans to pay your fair share, right? That's what they're going to say. Here's her quote. She defended the approach as a way to ensure that, quote, everyone takes part in supporting the state, unquote. That's about as close to everybody pays their fair share as you can get to, right, Brad? I mean, this is the direction they're going.
Yeah. So they've drained by draining the PFD, what they've done is they've protected the top 20% non-residents and the oil companies. They've shifted what were payments that were benefited everybody, and particularly were important to the middle and lower income Alaska classes. They've shifted that to protect the top 20%. Once they run out of that, then now it's time for everybody to pay. Except, I've done the analysis, a preliminary analysis on Giesel's head tax. It looks like it's progressive. It looks like it charges those with higher incomes more. But when you do it as a percent of income, which is how you do distributional analysis, it takes more. That takes more from middle and lower income Alaska families than from upper income families. So even their tax, now that they've drained the PFD, now that they've shifted all this protection to the upper incomes, now that they've done that, even the approaches where everybody pays something is going to put the bulk of the burden on middle and lower income Alaska families. It's amazing. This is truly a plutocratic state. We become a plutocratic state where the rich are in charge of the legislature, and the rich are protecting themselves by adopting revenue measures that continue to protect themselves all the way in. And the 2-account system is another example of that, by giving them a back door into the Permanent Fund Corpus and starting to drain that to continue to protect upper incomes, the non-residents and oil companies from contributing, because they're going to be taking it out of the corpus. They're going to be taking it out of the pockets of future Alaskans.
Protecting the fund. That's what this combining thing is all about. Protecting the fund, because they're afraid of overdrawing the ERA, et cetera, et cetera. Kevin makes a point. It's $9.8 billion in realized gains in the ERA right now. So almost $10 billion is sitting there, to which they deposit the earnings every year. So if they're still depositing that 4.8% every year, they're still going to be depositing $3 or $4 billion a year into there, of which we can draw out. Why is it such a crisis now?
Because they can see the writing on the wall. They can see that the way we're going, that we've run into these deficits. We're going to continue to run into these deficits. And they need a guaranteed revenue stream to, continue the spend without having to pay for it themselves. And so we got 9 some odd billion in there now, but if you're not replenishing that at the rate at which you're withdrawing it, and remember we're withdrawing from that ERA at 5% now. If you're not replenishing it at the rate at which you're withdrawing it, you're gonna drain it at some point. And so they can see that day coming, and they're trying to set up a mechanism to continue the spend, continue to draw that 5%, regardless of what the Permanent Fund Corporation is doing.
Except for they end up with exactly the same problem, only now it's 20 years down the road instead of next year. Sorry, go ahead.
The other thing is it takes the incentive off the Permanent Fund Corporation, which is a real problem. The Permanent Fund Corporation sort of has the incentive now to earn 5%. If the legislature, because you got to keep replenishing the earnings reserve, if the legislature can take 5% without regard to what actual earnings are, Permanent Fund Corporation really doesn't care that much about what it's earning, because the legislature is going to be happy. They're going to continue to take 5% no matter what. And the Permanent Fund Corporation can just sort of, as they've been doing for the last several years, they can just sort of glide along, enjoy their status and the titles they've given themselves, but not actually be earning enough to replenish it. But it doesn't matter, because the legislature is going to draw 5% anyway. What the current system does is keep an incentive on the Permanent Fund Corporation to continue to generate at least 5% real earnings. And I think that incentive is as important as anything else.
I would be interested to see if more candidates would pick up on this and start talking about this, and not in the way that Shelley was just talking about, where Bronson and company is all on board with the combining of the funds and this discussion on permanent fund earnings. I mean, why aren't we talking more? 4.8% return? Brian said that's like Christmas Club returns. I mean, that's exactly right. What happened to the Harvard Fund? What happened to the S&P, the Vanguard? Why aren't we looking at those things instead? I wish somebody would pick up that baton, but so far I've seen crickets from all the candidates on this. All right, Brad, we're about to jump back into it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Do it.
The Michael Duke Show, seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry, that is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Okay, we are back. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We like to call this the weekly top 3, the top 3 issues that Brad likes to dig out and scrub against us like sandpaper. It's, it's the truth, but it hurts, right? It's the truth, but it hurts us. It's frustrating to watch, but we're down to number 3 of the weekly top 3. And now Brad wants to talk about this comparison between PFD cuts and sales tax by legislative districts. Now, the governor's sales tax, we've all been told, DOA, dead, forget about it. They're not even going to talk about, they don't have the time. They just have no interest in it. They've all got alternative plans to keep the spend going. But Brad, you've done some analysis on this, and let's get into this.
Well, one of the things that fascinated me about that House Finance Committee hearing the week before last, when they took up the governor's proposed sales tax, one of the things that fascinated me was one of the lines of attack was, well, have you looked at what the impact is on the bush, for example, of the governor's sales tax? Because we've already got sales taxes out here. Have you looked at what the impact of this sales tax the governor's proposed would have on us? And 2 of the representatives who particularly hit on that theme were Neil Foster and Nellie Jimmy, the two of the 4 Bush caucus representatives, House members of the Bush caucus representatives. And they kept hitting them on how hard that sales tax was going to be and how it was regressive and how it was going to hurt, their constituents. And kept asking Department of Revenue whether they looked at it. When Department of Revenue said no, they hadn't done it in detail, then they just said, well, this isn't worth our time. So, I've got a week. I've got numbers. And so I dug in and took a look. at what the impact the impact of sales taxes versus PFD cuts were. And with the Census Bureau data that's out there, you can actually look at it by legislative district. The Census Bureau breaks down median family income by legislative district throughout the U.S., but it's available for Alaska. So you can find, and you can actually find it by quintile as well, which is a fascinating look sometimes. But you can look at the impact on the median household income by legislative district. So you take that median household income and you look at what the impact is of PFD cuts on that median household income, and you look at what the impact of the proposed sales tax would be on that median household income. And I did that. I mean, it took me a lot of time, but I did that and built a model that could replicate that and compared the two. And what happens if you, there you go. There's all the numbers. And this is in the Friday column in the Alaska Landmine or on my Substack page for people who want to actually see this and try to understand it. And compared the two, and you can see the percentage impact of the PFD cut. I've got it in one of the columns, and then the percentage or the dollar impact, and the dollar impact of the sales tax per median income household. And here's the fascinating thing. In 39 of the 40 House districts, and in all 20 of the state Senate districts, the sales tax takes less out of the median income family in that district, takes less out of the median income family in that district than PFD cuts do. Or put another way, PFD cuts take more out of the median family in household income than the sales tax would. There is money left over, money in the pockets of the median income family in 59 of the 60 legislative districts. Money left over in the pockets if you restore PFD cuts and take money out instead by a sales tax. The exception is the richest district in the state in terms of median family income, household income, which is Kai Holland's district in South Anchorage. In that district, the only district in the state where this happens, in that district, a sales tax would take more out of the pockets of the median household in that district than the PFD cuts. That district has a median household income, which means half of the households in that district earn more, and half of the households in that district earn less. That district has a median household income of $171,000. So in that district, sales taxes would take more out of the median household in that district than PFD cuts would. In the other 59 legislative districts, the other 39 House districts and the 20 Senate districts, PFD cuts take more out of the household income. The two districts where it takes the most are Neil Foster and Nellie Jimmy's, the two who were among the most vocal in attacking the Dunleavy proposal, are the two districts who would benefit most by substituting a sales tax for PFD cuts. They would benefit. The median household in their districts would benefit most by using the sales tax in substitution for PFD cuts, and it's by a fairly wide margin. I mean, in Neil Foster's district, the household would end up with 5% more in its pocket if the PFD was restored and the sales tax was used instead to raise revenue. In Nellie's district, 3.8%, where they would end up median. This is the middle family. Median would end up with 3.8% more in their pocket. Those in the lower half of the income bracket would end up with much more in their pockets than even those numbers, because these numbers all relate to the median household income. So what's going on? I mean, why, if they benefit from substituting one for the other, why are they opposing the Dunleavy bill? Why are they so vocal in opposing the Dunleavy bill? Well, it would make the spend harder. It's easy to go it's easy for the legislature to go grab the PFD, grab a portion of the PFD. They don't have to go to the people. They don't have to explain what they're doing, really. They just say, oh, PFDs are spending, and we're just reducing that spending. We're just, we're just shifting it over to another use. It's easy for them to do. It's all within their control. A sales tax, they would have to affirmatively justify why they're instituting a sales tax and why the spending that the sales tax would support is deserving of that additional of taking revenue out of the pockets of families. They don't have to do that. They've demonstrated over the past decade. They don't have to do that when they do PFD cuts because nobody asks that question. They've figured out a way to just sort of slither by and not answer that question. So even though what that analysis shows is that even though a sales tax would take less out of the pockets of 59 of the 60 of the median household in 59 of the 60 districts, even though a sales tax would take less out of their pockets, legislators are opposing it because it would make their ability to access the money more difficult, would make their ability to justify what they're doing more difficult. And so they are prioritizing the spend, prioritizing easy access to money that they can spend over an approach that actually makes the lives of their constituents better, makes the economic situation of their constituents better. It's a fascinating analysis. It was fascinating doing the numbers and figuring out what the comparisons were.
Looks like we may have lost Brad for a minute here. We're coming up at the end of the hour. Brad Keithley. I'm sorry, we lost you there for a second, Brad, but final thoughts here. We got about a minute and a half.
Well, it's a fascinating analysis in the sense that it shows that throughout the state, with one exception, Kai Holland's district, throughout the state, sales taxes are better for Alaska families, leave more money in the pockets of Alaska families than PFD cuts do. But Governor Dunleavy's right in the proposal to make that substitution, that he's benefiting Alaska families by making that substitution. It's fascinating to see those numbers and then hear the legislators complain about it because, it just makes their life difficult.
Yeah. Well, and they just don't have time. They just don't have time to do it. All right. Well, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3 comes to an end. You could find Brad at ak4sb.com or out on Twitter or X, I guess. Still trying to get caught up with all the new lingo. Brad, thank you so much for coming on board and joining us today. We appreciate your analysis and your hard work on this. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
If you want to see Brad's column with all the stuff that we just talked about, including that chart, you can go over to the Alaska Landmine and look at his Friday column, The Impact of Governor Dunleavy's Proposed Sales Tax. You can find it there. All right, folks, we got to go. Hour 2 is dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Back with more after this. Willie says, and I think this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, he says, Brad, your chart is full of holes, starting with the fact that nobody's getting a PFD. So the PFD is gone, and you get a sales tax on top of the new tax. Sorry, you're all wet about rural Alaska sales. That's, again, this is all assuming that those two things were equitable and working, but he's not wrong. I think what we're going to have is no PFD and some form of tax at this point, right?
Well, what he's skipping over is the fact that Governor Dunleavy's proposal tied them together in a package that the PFD is restored and put in the Constitution, so it can't be played with again. The PFD is restored in exchange for getting a sales tax. If there's not a tie, if you're just creating a sales tax on top of PFD cuts, then yeah, that's problematic. But this was analyzing Governor Dunleavy's proposal, which tied those two together and made one the substitution for the other. And it shows that Dunleavy was correct, that substitution works. Not even Nellie or Neil made the attack on the fact that it was incremental, that was layering on top, because that's not what the governor's proposal is. They were attacking it. They were attacking the governor's proposal, saying that somehow that it was worse.
Bruce Tangerman in the chat room. He says, interesting either or analysis. Unfortunately, this is an and proposition in the spender's mind. And I mean, I would say that that's the legislature's position. This is an and position for them. We're going to go ahead and take the PFD and give you a tax of some kind, as shown by their actions thus far this last 10 days.
Again, this was Governor Dunleavy's proposal to make it an analysis of Governor Dunleavy's proposal to make it a substitution. I mean, what you're essentially, what these attacks essentially are saying is, you forget about that part of Dunleavy's proposal where he ties them together and just view it as incremental. Well, that's a different proposal. That's not what the governor proposed. The governor proposed one as a substitution for another. And analyzing that proposal, this shows that the sales tax is better than PFD cuts.
When you look at this and you look at the governor's race, you look at what's coming, you look at the kind of the roster of what's happening. You look at the numbers, the 10-year plan. What happens, Brad? What happens in the next 5 years in this state, based on everything you're seeing at this exact moment? What do you see going on here?
Here's I guess, Michael. Here's how I pump myself up in the morning, and here's how I get depressed in the morning. The answers are there. I mean, Dunleavy, 7 years in the last year of his term, way too late in the cycle, but Dunleavy puts out a good long-term solution, a good response to the situation in which we find ourselves in. That if we adopted it as he's proposed it, tied together, if we adopt it, we put more money in the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families. Indeed, a lot of upper income Alaska families. We strengthen the Alaska economy. We strengthen the amount of money in the state because we start having non-resident money coming into the state that we don't have now. We have a solid long-term solution. So in the mornings, when you start out, and I go, well, there's solutions. We don't have to be in this situation. There's solutions. And then as the day wears on, you listen to stuff like, Willie and Bruce just came out with, oh, well, that wouldn't work. It's all incremental. And then you go, well, then you just get depressed thinking about, well, the practical situation is they'll never adopt the right solutions. They'll never adopt the right long-term solutions. We have solutions to this issue. We have things that would work, that would put more money in the pockets of Alaska families, that would that would diversify Alaska's revenue source and have non-residents become a significant share of the revenue source, just like they are in the other 49 states. We have solutions that are out there that would work and make the Alaska economy stronger. But we just have a bunch of people who are naysayers and say, oh, that would never work. And, the legislature would never do that. And just attack it from all sides. So, you finally just sort of give up. You finally say, well, okay, it's not going to work because everybody says it's not going to work. There are solutions out there. There are long-term solutions out there that improve the overall Alaska economy significantly. It's just getting the willpower to bring together to adopt them.
It's the lack of political will. That's the whole point here. The whole point is the lack of political will, the willingness to be the adult in the room, and quite honestly, the willingness to give up the gravy train of the spending. That's what the problem is. And with the group and the crew we have in there right now, there's not enough people who are calling stop. There's not enough people who are pulling back on the reins. I mean, you got a handful of them, but they're all in the minorities, and the majorities are all just full steam ahead. Damn the torpedoes. Here's where we go.
Yeah. We have people who are looking after government, who are prioritizing government. We don't have people who are prioritizing Alaska families, Alaska households, who are prioritizing getting pockets and the money in the pockets of Alaska families.
Right. The private economy at all. It's all about what is the government spend. Forget about what's happening in the private economy. And that's troubling to say the least. Brad, final thoughts here.
Well, Michael, we've got solutions. We've got solutions that we need to keep bringing forth and need to keep talking about. Got a lot of naysayers out there, but we've got solutions out there. And it's just a question of developing enough political will to adopt those solutions. Enough political will that people get concerned about Alaska families as opposed to about how the government is doing.
All right, Brad, thank you so much, my friend. As always, great to talk with you. We'll catch you next week.
Michael, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that does it for us. Hour 1 is in the can. We got more coming up. Hour 2 dead ahead. The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Let's do it.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah, live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find links to the audio-only stream and links to the podcast, as well as links to social media like Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble, where we simulcast the radio show every day out there on those video platforms. And, of course, live around the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Tuesday. Thank you for being patient with us. I know I didn't make any early announcement about being off the air yesterday. It was a combination of things that caused me to kind of last minute. I decided late Thursday night, and then I totally forgot to mention it on Friday that we were going to be off the air, but it was a combination of things that were happening here at the radio station and some family stuff. And then on top of that, half the client base was off on Monday because of the holiday. So I decided to take advantage of that. And I appreciate it. Thank you for allowing it. But here we are, first day of the week, Tuesday, just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets and the weekly top 3. You know that normally I spent this first segment recapping some of the points that Brad made with my thoughts. We're going to get to that here in just a second. In the second segment, we've got some highlights of things that are happening, including some things that are going on in Fairbanks, which, I mean, just, all I could say is the longer that I'm away from Fairbanks, the happier that I am that I don't live there anymore. That's pretty much, I mean, and I know probably folks who are listening in Fairbanks are like, guys, seriously. You got to get a grip on what's going on in Fairbanks because it is out of control. So we're going to talk about that in the second segment, and we'll go through that. And then, of course, at the end of the show today, we're going to finish up with Chris Story, who comes in to give us our weekly uplift every week, and so we're going to have that with him, and he's going to come on board and be part of it with us. That's all coming up. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the things that Brad was touching on. And I guess the one that really stuck out to me of the weekly top 3, and all three were great. All three were great pieces and parts. The PFD being zeroed out as a political measure, again, just shows you where the hearts of your legislators are. It just shows you exactly what they're trying to do. And I think it basically just shows you that they are there to protect the spend. Now, I don't give a free pass to anybody that voted against this in the minority right now, because that's just kind of a survival mechanism. They had to vote against this in this case. And I mean, they knew it was a 6-5 vote with a majority against the minority. So they knew it was a set deal. But they, so I'm not giving anybody a pass quite yet on that, even those that voted against this, because we have other commentary and we have other things like the minority leader, Delana Johnson, saying, do I think there's going to be a full statutory PFD? Do I think that there's even a possibility of that? No, I don't think so. Do I think it could be higher and better? Absolutely. And do I think it's the closest thing that we have to a spending cap in this universe right now? Absolutely. She's calling it a spending cap, which is, I just got so many things to say on that subject. But again, this all comes back to the fact that this is holding back legislators who want to spend it. We heard the Kathy Giesel, we heard the former Senator Von Imhoff, we heard those comments in the Commonwealth North thing from last week or the week before, I guess. We heard the ideas that, just think of all the things we could spend this $685 million on. We already heard that. We heard Josephson in this discussion specifically on zeroing out the PFD in the House Finance Committee. He said, what constrains us is public perception and a desire for the dividend. That's what constrains them. They're spending. So maybe it is truly a sales tax. Maybe it is truly, a spending cap in that regard. He said, but the prospect of paying a statutory dividend is so obliterated in our fiscal position that it doesn't constrain us anymore. Meaning they've got so many things that they need to spend on that just doesn't matter. They're willing to bite the bullet and take the chances with the public. They're zeroing it out. Now, again, I agree with Brad. I think they're going to come back in later. They will have increased the spending somehow. Because again, remember, this is all about optics. This is all about political theater. They zero out the PFD. It gives them a $700-800 million surplus now, because and they will then use that to spend on whatever pet project that they have waiting in the wings. And then whatever's left over, then they can vote on it and say, oh, look, but we gave you a PFD. Look, I voted for a PFD to give you the $200 or $300 or $400 or $500 from this PFD. I voted on that. So I can be the hero here. Again, not talking about the tens of hundreds of millions of dollars that they've added to the spending, which again, as Brad points out, just exacerbates the long-term problem, right? Because if we have a crisis now with essentially, even with flat spending, which is what the governor's 10-year forecast essentially bakes into its formulas, is essentially flat spending, only adjusting it for inflation. And we've got, a $500 million to $1 billion to $1.5 billion deficits moving forward every year. If they kill the dividend now and then add some of that surplus into monies that have to be spent and accounted for in the future, like, for example, if they add to the BSA again, or if they institute this defined benefits program, which is estimated to cost about $90 million a year on the low side, that is, again, in perpetuity. It's not a one-time spend. It's added to the bottom line year after year, day after day, from now until the end of time. And so here we are. Again, anything that they can do to protect the spending, to protect that. Nobody wants to be the guy. Nobody wants to be the designated driver in the room and says, oh, I think you've had enough. Right? Nobody wants to be that adult that has the group of folks that have gone out partying on a Friday night and say, "Ooh, Johnny, I think you've had enough. I'm cutting you off." Nobody's doing that. And that's what needs to happen. Friends don't let friends spend like legislators. But nobody's stepping up. Nobody's willing to be the adult in the room. There's a handful of legislators in there that are trying to talk fiscal sense, but they're being drowned out by the chorus of people who just say, we absolutely have to, we need to, we must. And those are all the folks who are in power. Those are all the folks who are in leadership. They're the ones that are in control of the committees. They're the ones that have created and formed the majorities. That's why you have bipartisan majorities. It has nothing to do with party affiliation or even philosophical. I'm sure that many of the members of the majority have philosophical differences over certain things, social issues and things like that, but they can all agree on one thing: greed is good. Government spending is good. It is the highest, best use of the money, and we should do it. We know better than you how to spend it. I mean, Kathy Giesel and von Hemhoff said that. We know we have so many things that we could spend this money on that just, if you would just listen, we know that's what it's about. The highest, best use is putting it in their hands to spend, and nobody wants to hear it. Nobody wants to hear the fact that they can't keep doing that. And the handful of people in the legislature who are running around like Chicken Little, only they're telling the truth, are being ignored. The Rob Myers and the Kevin McCabe's. I mean, when Ben was in there, Ben Carpenter was in there, he was truth telling, and it got him unelected because nobody wanted to hear it. Even the public doesn't want to hear it. Even the public doesn't want to hear the fact that the gravy train is grinding to a halt. Now, if they get this plan to combine the funds, well, the gravy train will continue on for a while longer. Now, I guess my question is, will the Alaska people be bamboozled? Will the people of Alaska see through the charade? Will there be a grassroots movement if they get this passed through and they actually get it onto the ballot? Because this is a constitutional amendment, this combining of the funds. It's not simply a legislative perk. They have to actually get it passed with a high vote threshold because it's a constitutional amendment, and then the citizenry has to vote on it. Is there going to be a grassroots movement to point out the fact that this eliminates and removes all the protections that the permanent fund currently has? Or will this be more of a multi-million-dollar campaign from, companies like GCI and others? We've seen them jump into this fight in the past, right? Over the PFD. Ron Duncan poured millions of dollars into campaigns fighting against the PFD and getting that POMV passed and everything else. Will somebody else step up and say, the biggest danger in this is that it removes the constitutional protection from the Permanent Fund Corpus by combining the funds and allows them to spend unimpeded for as long as they like? I don't know. I mean, I would hope that there's a group of us out there that could come together and start to fight this. I mean, and you should be planning now. Maybe it won't pass out of the legislature. Maybe it won't hit the threshold in the legislature. But I'll be honest with you, I'm hearing a lot of Republicans who are saying, oh, this is a great idea. So maybe they have the votes. And maybe what we should be planning for now is how do we fight this in the court of public opinion? Maybe that's what we need to be focused on. Because if they get that, if they get this combining of the funds, they can all breathe a sigh of relief because they've dodged the bullet for a little bit longer here. They've protected the spend. But we'll have to see where that goes from here. But I mean, I just look at this and I just realize that this whole thing and the fact that the Permanent Fund Corporation has admitted its own documentation, folks, in its own documentation, the Permanent Fund is admitting that they're only going to get a real return over the next 10 years of 4.8%. And the legislature is going to be drawing 5%. This graphic should be on every ad, everything. It should show right there. This is what they're going to get on their returns. This is what we're going to be taking. Where does that extra 2% come from? Oh, it comes from the corpus of the fund. And what happens when you eat your seed corn? I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see where it goes from here. All right. We're coming up on the break. We got to go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Up next, we're going to talk about what's going on up at Fairbanks, a couple different things up there, and a look at this new education tax, which Kathy Giesel is pushing. We'll be back. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Hour 2 continues right after this.
Tune in Friday for our weekend entertainment and movie streaming review with our guest critic, Willie Waffle. That's actually his real name. Really? That's his real name? Man, his parents must have hated him. The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. In the break right now. We go back up here to see what you guys have been saying during the thing. Sorry, I'm scrolling backwards here. The PFD, says Rob, is a de facto spending cap right now. It prevents the state from spending by diverting money into the private sector. And in that regard, I could see that. Now they've just ripped the Band-Aid off, though, right? They're just going to dump it all in there, and then you get whatever's left, if anything. If anything. I'm just going through here. Miguel says, great start to the week. Yep. Willie says, if you want a sales tax that works fairly, then cut the governor's sales tax rates in half for everyone off the road system. $3 gas in Palmer versus $7 gas in Bethel. Half the tax for the Bush would be fair. I mean, we could talk about it. I mean, I would not necessarily be opposed to that. We could talk about that. Kim says Neil Foster shows no shame. Why should he? It's been working for him. Why should he show shame? He's done good. How long has he been in the legislature? I'm wondering now. How long has he been in the legislature? Neil Foster. He's been in the legislature 15 years. He's been in the legislature for 15 long years. And it's been working for him. Why shouldn't he? Right? And you have to start, and you have us start the week with Brad, said Terry. Hey, I'm only here to help, Terry. That's just how it is. It's just how it is. Republican needs to get off their arses. Complacency will be our end, literally. Well, and again, I mean, it's not that they need to get up and do something. They are doing something. You've got over half the Republicans who are in on it, who are in on the game, who are happily participating in this. The statutory dividend is $3,700 this year, but we get $600. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I fully believe that and I've said this before. First of all, I said that I didn't think we'd get a PFD this year, but I had to revise it because I realized it's an election year. But I believe that we're going to get $500 or less. That's the one. That's where I feel right now. And Kim says $500 this year because it's an election year and $0 next year. For many legislators, it's the party of increased spending faster versus the party of increased spending slower. Yeah, the bottom line, the net is an increase in spending. That's where it goes. Terry says Ben lost because of the lies of Bjorkman. In part that, yes, Terry, but also because the public doesn't want to face the music that we can't be all things to all people. It was because of some of the things that Bjorkman said, but Ben was talking truth, and anybody that took a look at it understood that. Ben was being the adult in the room, and the electorate doesn't want to hear it. Otherwise, there'd be 150 people in this chat room right now instead of 50. If they wanted to hear this, because I've been talking about this for years, and it's all coming true. One thing after another, it's coming true. People just don't want to hear it. That's what it's about. Living in Fairbanks makes me want to sell my house. Yeah, well, I mean, it can be freeing. All right, here we go.
Today's recipe is the important Alaskan news of the day with a dash of sardonic smile, a pinch of eye twinkle, not that you can see that on the radio, and a touch of acidity. It goes down easier like that. Don't question our recipes. The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, welcome back to the program. We're continuing now. Our two. We're rapidly moving through it. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Fairbanks, and some of the things that are going on up there. So we mentioned this last week because it came out on a Thursday, but not much else happened on that. The Fairbanks North Star Borough Assembly voted 7-2 on Thursday to push forward with the construction of the $33 million animal shelter that we like to call the Puppy Palace, the Taj Mahal for puppies. Only Tammy Wilson and Brett Rottermund voted against it. Wilson said she could not, in good conscience, vote for a $33 million facility. She noted that expenditure translates into $1,852 a day for 50 straight years, or $660,000 for half a century, if you want to look at it that way, a year. She said that kind of money should be going to shore up school roofs, classroom updates, and critical community projects. I mean, what about the $250+ million in deferred maintenance in the borough? That $33 million could have taken a chunk off that. Oh, wait. That's what Brett said. He asked the question of what happened? How did we let this facility that we built in 1974, how did we let it get to this point? He criticized the borough for failing to adequately maintain the existing shelter. He questioned why the flooring was allowed to wear out, why doors are not working properly. Quote, why weren't those fixed? You got to take care of your stuff. Where do you think this building's going to be in 50 years if we treat it like our current building? The $33 million, they won't care, because in 50 years, they'll spend $50 million on a new puppy palace. Because that's the plan. Because maintenance is not sexy, and maintenance doesn't employ a bunch of people, so they'll wait for it to be ready to just fall down on its own, and then they'll say, well, what we really need is another building, and we'll just knock this one down and build another one. Just look at all the money it puts into the community. Look at the and he asked questions like, did they look into the due diligence? Did they look at more cost-effective solutions? Apparently there's a veterinarian's office just down the street that is up for sale, and he was asking, could we remodel that facility? It's already there. It's got the surgical suite. It's got everything you need. Couldn't we do that? But when he asked that, he got some real vague answers, who just generally claimed it's just too expensive to remodel instead of it's just better to build new. He questioned whether the borough had met all the standards that National Veterinarian Group claim are essential in modern-day animal shelters, which, by the way, was a point that was regularly used to justify the need for a new facility. But the borough attorney, Jill Dolan, said, well, those standards are not binding on the borough. So they use it as a justification, but when he asked if the new one actually fits those standards, it's not. They're not really binding. I mean, we want to, Garrett Armstrong said he received 54 emails in support and 35 opposed. And he said he knows the borough's got 95,000 citizens, but the email showed him that the majority are in favor. Dave Guttenberg admitted that he'd rather spend the $33 million on schools, but he thought the time was ripe for the money to be put towards a new animal shelter, which he shows that the community cares about animal welfare. So it's about virtue signaling? That's what it's about now? Like I said, every time I read something about Fairbanks, I'm just like, wow, man. I am so glad that I don't live there anymore. I'm just, at some point I'm just like, because this kind of stuff is madness. Absolute madness. This had already, and I'm surprised that somebody didn't try and bring this back to, because one of Jill Dolan's favorite things is dilatory. Now, for those of you who don't know what dilatory means, it means that if something has been decided by an elected body, you can't bring it back, usually within a couple, 3 years, because it's already been decided. And if you bring it back, then it's dilatory because the matter's already been decided. And she actually made a fuss about this a couple times during my tenure on the assembly when when somebody tried to bring something back that had been gone over the year before or whatever. She was very bullish on not being dilatory. This thing had already been submarined a year ago. I'm very surprised that somebody didn't bring up the issue being dilatory in this regard. But here you go. Here's what you guys, this is who you voted for, but I didn't vote for them. Well, apparently you didn't get out there and get anybody else to vote for, the more level-headed conservative people. So this is what you get. You get a 7-2 assembly that does whatever the hell they want and spends your money however they want to spend it, even when the public has already said no. And I'll be honest with you, I expected that the room would be pretty full of naysayers, but the Watchman actually has a picture of the room up in their piece, showing the people testifying, and there's 10, 15 people in the room. to testify. That's it. I mean, are we just getting wore out? Are we just tired of fighting the same battles over and over and over again? Again, that's part of the plan, which is why, again, I'm kind of wondering why nobody brought up the dilatory nature of this, because that would have been a way to stop it. But instead, they just keep bringing it up again and again and again, hoping that people will just run out of steam to come down and testify over and over and over again. I think that's part of the plan. We'll just keep bringing it back until they said yes. I mean, we'll just keep bringing it back until we just wear them down. So $33 million out of your pocket right there. So glad I still pay borough property taxes. I'm so glad that my property tax payment is going to that. That just so good. And now on top of that, they've got a new survey out in the Fairbanks borough that is they're looking at expanding the Land Use Enforcement Authority, increasing regulations and requirements for resource extractions, imposing greater control over private land use, expanding borough health and social service powers, and leaving new building energy efficiency mandates, constructing high density and public housing, and more. This is all part of the comprehensive plan, the regional comprehensive plan. Now, most people don't understand what a comprehensive plan is, but basically it's a guide, it's a framework that boroughs and assemblies use for legal justification for their actions, because they paid somebody big bucks to plan out their community for them, because they certainly couldn't figure it out for themselves. And the comprehensive plan covers everything from parks and transportation, economic development, housing, land use, everything else. It helps guide local policies, housing and business development, public investments, and other planning efforts. It's built from our community's shared vision of who we are and who we want to be. Now, this is the same comprehensive plan, by the way, that said we need to eliminate all parking spaces in downtown Fairbanks because we need to make it a more walking-friendly community. Like some mom with 3 kids was going to park over at the JCPenney's parking lot at 40 below in a December before Christmas to then walk them all 3 blocks away to do their Christmas shopping in the stores of the Co-op or along the front of Main Street there, 2nd Avenue in Fairbanks, because that was going to make, instead of just being able to park out front. That's the same kind of justification we're talking about. That's what the comp plan called for that. Again, when they're talking about constructing high-density public housing, that's what they're talking about. They don't want individualism. They want everybody living in one building, because then it eliminates the need for parking and roads and all this other kind of stuff. Well, there's a survey that is out that is going to help develop where the comprehensive plan goes. And already environmental activist groups are calling on all their left-leaning supporters and allies to fill out the survey in order to advance many of the ideas that they support in this plan, which it's already a left-leaning eco-environmentally friendly plan, right? Like I said, eliminate the parking spots and make high-density housing and put, walking paths everywhere and do all this kind of stuff. It's already heavily weighed towards initiatives that would make them happy, like land use regulations, more government enforcement powers, building mandates. There's no questions about reducing taxes, easing regulations, or incentivizing new business development or resource development. No, none of that stuff. There is a space at the end of the survey where residents have 1,000 words to provide additional information. So maybe if you care about your community, you'd take 5 minutes out from watching the Olympics tonight, and maybe you'd go fill out this survey, which I believe is available over at the Borough website, or you can go to the Watchman article at alaskawatchman.com where they've got a link to the new survey, and you could fill it out and have your say. Right? You could say, here's what we need. We need fewer regulations. We need fewer restrictions on private property. We need to be able to do with our property what we can to make money and do what maybe that's what would, or maybe they just won't listen anyway and it just doesn't matter. I mean, I'll tell you right now, it doesn't matter if you continue to have the assembly that you have right now, because those folks, they're going to do what they want. You can't tell me what to do. I'm going to do what I want. All right, we got to go. Back with more. Chris Story's up next. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes,
allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Oh, I depressed myself completely at this point. All right, we're going to bring Chris Story on here. When will the phone lines be open this week, says Miguel. I don't I don't know. Do you want to do the phone lines? You know what I hate is when I open the phone lines and like one person calls in. I'd really love to. I'd rather have people call up and argue with me than not get a bunch of phone calls. That just, it's crazy. Fat Ray says, "Oh, you better believe I took that survey and disagreed with everything." Good for you, my friend. Good for you. The comprehensive plan is a legal document. Court cases live and die on that. Exactly. And it's used as a justification for everything they do. Just like your plan to reduce government spending, MD, it did not work, so you jump right on a sales tax. Did you give up after 25 years of trying to reduce government growth? I never said that I was 100% on a sales tax. I said the only way that I would ever support a sales tax if there was a spending cap attached to it to allow us to have our permanent fund dividend back, Frank. But, I mean, nuances are hard. I understand that. I understand nuance is not your thing. That's cool. That's cool. Also, can you believe our borough mayor on record stated we need to have our buildings up to current building code as well? Oh, my God. You just have to retrofit everything? No, you won't retrofit a thing. You just knock all the buildings down and build them back up again. You can run, Michael, but you can't hide. This infection will spread to you eventually. I mean, I escaped. I feel like I escaped just in time, but we'll see. We'll see what happens there. I mean, we can only hope that maybe, just maybe, we don't see some of that madness down here on the Kenai Peninsula. Now, I'm sure we probably will, but again, I don't live inside any of the cities, so at least there's that benefit for me, right? At least there's that benefit on top of it. All right, let's bring Chris on board here. I mean, I can go through some of these other comments here, but and see what's going on here. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Doing great, Michael. It's always nice to jump on here and hear how depressed you are just before we get together. That's wonderful. That just makes my day. It actually raises the bar. Now I have to live up to the challenge from keeping you from the ledge. Don't jump.
Yeah. Don't jump. Or maybe you're like Mel Gibson in the Lethal Weapon, and you just grab me and jump off with me to make sure we hit the big bag.
That was it.
Yeah,
That was a great scene. That was good.
That was a great scene. Let's see. The borough. I'm sorry, Chris. I apologize. I'm still stuck on these comments. The borough mayor spent time with the Alaska Center. That's the Alaska Center for the Environment to game out the comp plan. Of course they did, because again, they can use it for legal I mean, you want to talk to Chris about, you want to see Chris's blood boil, just talk to him about spending outside money to create a comprehensive plan. How much have they spent down here in Homer, in the city of Homer, Chris? What was it? That 500,000 one time and 600,000 the second time?
650 for bringing in Agnew back out of Anchorage to tell us how to operate and where to go and how to grow.
Yeah, they of course know much better than you who live here how your city should be. I'm sure that they wanted to eliminate all parking lots and create walking paths everywhere, right?
Yeah, I haven't actually read this current iteration of it. I was once on the review committee, and felt really honored. The mayor had asked me at the time. This is back in like 2005 or 6 to be on it, and I lasted for 2 meetings. And again, same firm out of Anchorage, Agnew Beck, and they were charging, I think back then, around 300,000. That was pre-Biden. Now post Biden at 650. But anyway. So yeah, I just was like, no, this guy knows nothing of our community. He's wasting everybody's time, and he's asking, infantile questions, and he was leading the group. It was so obvious that he was leading to a foregone conclusion. I'm like, we're just puppets. I could feel, the puppetry at work.
Yeah, no, it just makes me glad I don't live in Homer proper, because
me too. I am really glad you do not live in Homer. I got to be honest. Having the 8-mile separation is everything to me.
That 8 miles is everything. I know totally. It is everything. Absolutely. Barbara says there's a guy named Griswold who lives in Homer that's gone to the Supreme Court 4 times over the comp plan down there in Homer. You may not agree with him, but he would be an interesting guest to have on the show. The value of a comp plan. Are you familiar with him?
Frank Griswold. Who isn't familiar with him? Absolutely. He is a perpetual thorn in the side of unfortunately not just authority. He also has been quite a litigious menace for private property owners and individuals as well. But she makes the point that he has successfully sued our city a number of times, and he's been successful at it. But now he's a complete muckraker that does zero for society. That's just my humble opinion.
Wow, way to be positive this morning, Chris. All right, what's our topic for today? Quickly.
Well, you brought it up. How to do more with less.
Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, Chris Story comes in every Tuesday. He just said it to try and talk me off the ledge. I'm a little frustrated. I'm a little depressed at what's going on in the communities that I've lived in, places that I love, but he's here to talk us down. So today he's going to talk with us a little bit about how to do more with less, which is what I think our government should be learning at every turn. I think that should be stenciled on every piece of government equipment and t-shirt, how to do more with less. Chris Story. Hello, my friend.
Were you ever, were you in public school, Michael, or were you homeschooled? I actually don't know.
I was in public school the whole way.
You'll appreciate this. In the 5th grade, I was sitting in the back of science class, Mr. Myhill's class, and the sun was at my back. Big window, beautiful, sunny spring day. And it's science class. And so I've got a magnifying glass in my hand. I mean, just naturally, what do you do on a sunny day in the 5th grade with a magnifying glass? You burn the kid's neck in front of you. But you can only do that by doing less. If you move the magnifying glass even just a little bit, if you do more, you actually accomplish nothing. To burn the kid's neck, you've got to hold it very still. You have to do less. You have to have a concentrated effort and not move around, not do anything else. You can't be multitasking. You can't be switch tasking. You must be solely focused on that one little point of white light on the back of the neck. And here's where it all went off the rails was I wasn't able to move quickly enough. This kid, he leapt out of his seat like he had been bit by a cobra. And I mean, he literally leapt up and turned at the same time like a pirouette, and he was facing me, and there I was with the magnifying glass. And so of course I got in trouble. I got detention. I got, Michael, you'd be surprised to hear that I did get into some trouble in school, but it taught a valuable lesson about how you can accomplish more by doing less.
How to hide your sociopathic tendencies? Because when you said that, I thought, oh, I'd probably, burn my name into the desk or something. No, I'm going to burn the student in front of me. That
Yeah,
says
I'm
a
not
lot.
gonna I'm not gonna hurt personal property, school property. Are you kidding me?
Okay. So, wow, the setup for this. How to do more with less. Go ahead. Go ahead, my friend.
I don't know that I could demonstrate it any more clearly than that, but I will bring up Henry Ward Beecher, who was a preacher and a speaker in the 1800s and incredibly effective. He was known to raise a lot of money and go down south and buy slaves and bring them back and set them free. He was an abolitionist. He was an author and, again, a sought after speaker, and had a huge congregation of his own, and a very successful pastor. And so one day he was asked, naturally, how is it, Mr. Beecher, how is it that you accomplish so much more? You do so much more than other people. And he said, I actually don't do more than anybody. I actually do less than most people. Naturally, the interviewer was quite confused. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. He says, well, most people do things 3 times. They do it once in anticipation of doing the thing. Then they actually do it. They do it once in actuality. And then they do it once again in rumination. And he said, the secret to my success and how I've accomplished everything that I've done is I do things only in actuality. I just do things one time, and it became more effective. And that's something I have to work on all the time. That anticipation of doing something, even if it's something you're looking forward to, you can kind of distract yourself by being focused on it versus what you're doing in the present. It takes longer to accomplish what you're doing right now. Then later, after you've done the thing, you think, man, could I have done more? Did I show up on the Duke's show as I should have? Could I talked about something besides burning a kid? What does Michael think of me now? Is Michael really concerned about me? Is he not going to let me drive next time we go to lunch? I don't know. All those things could take up so much time, when the reality is success lives in the moment. Not living for the moment, but being present in this moment. That's where the best life, the good life, that's where success lives. This is what Mr. Beecher said, and I agree completely.
It's interesting because the anticipatory, that leads to procrastination and a lot of other things, but there are people who live on the other end. They don't necessarily procrastinate it. They do something and then they second guess themselves. And that's the rumination thing you're talking about.
Exactly.
There are people who are trapped in the past and can't get over, something that they did or something that was done to them or something along those lines. And that's not any better than procrastinating on the other side. That's in some ways even worse.
Dreading, maybe it's even a dental appointment. You just dread it, and you live what was the expression about a coward dies 1,000 times and a valiant but once? It's the same thing. We just live in this either dread, or then you do it and then you regret it, or you regret how you showed up, or second guess, to your point, and question, did I do enough? I think just being focused, trying to, I put out a coin 2 years ago. On the back of the coin, it said to look forward, learn from the past, live in the present. And it was a little 3-line philosophy of, I think, what the good life is. I think how to live on top of the world, how to not only get what you want in life, but enjoy it and know that you've got it. Know that you're accomplishing what it is you're supposed to be doing here, what you're put here to do. I think every one of us has a mission. Every one of us has purpose and meaning, and we're here to make it matter. But if we're not living in the present and where, like you so often have talked about, the guy who lives back on the gridiron from high school and that one play he made, or the cheerleader when she used to be able to do the splits, whatever, and we're just living in those glory days and not really being present, or I'll be happy when syndrome. Oh, when I get published, when I get my own business, when I finally get this, that, or the other, then I'll be happy. The truth of it is, probably not. If you're not happy where you are, you probably won't be happy where you're going. You've got to be present and focused. And again, just think about burning that kid in front of you. If you don't hold that magnifying glass still and you're not present in that moment, he's not going to feel a thing. And you'll have wasted a great joke.
Yeah, a great joke. Oh, you frightened me, my friend. Well, break this down to us into bite-sized usable chunks here. So I'm going to do X, right? I'm going to I don't know, file my taxes, or I'm going to do something. And so how do I do it just once without how do I get to that point of just doing it the one time instead of the 3 times?
Everybody's got their own approach to, I think, accomplishing or getting things done. Ohio, only handle it once. You can use whatever an acronym or whatever style of planning and preparatory scheme that works for you. Here's what I like to do. I like to journal first thing in the morning, and I like to talk to myself about what I'm grateful for. I like to think about and then what do I want to accomplish today? If I accomplish X, Y, and Z by the end of today, it will have been a great day. And I have a small list, very small. There was a guy whose name's escaping me, but he changed the life of Charles Schwab by introducing Ivy Lee. That was his name, Ivy Lee. He said, look, if you put 6 things that you're going to accomplish in order of importance on a note card, and you work on the number 1 thing, and it takes you all day, and next day, number 2 becomes number 1, and you add something to the bottom, you'll accomplish more than most people in a lifetime. So whatever system works for you to make sure you stay focused on A, the task at hand, B, not living with rumination or just anticipatory regrets already before you even do the thing. Whatever it takes for you. Some people love checklists. Have you ever made a list of things and you've added things to it you've already accomplished just so you can then cross it off? Fine. If that works for you, then have the list and be ready. But I just like the idea of starting the day with the written word, like my own handwriting, so I can set out what's important for me and get rid of all the noise and just say, look, if I only accomplish these 2 or 3 things today, this is what I'm here to do today. But living in the present and just taking advantage of the moment with your family, with friends, with coworkers, with clients or customers or your boss, whatever it is, just being present with every conversation you have today and see what a difference it makes.
I've been guilty of that. I've got a list of things to do, and then I add 3 or 4 things to the list, and then I check them off because I'm like, I did these things instead. Or there's just something about that, and having a list is definitely a good way to start, I think, in that regard, because it gives you something to shoot for. And then there is that sense of accomplishment once you mark it off. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There is some kind of sense of accomplishment. 45 seconds, Chris, final thoughts.
I appreciate everything you're bringing to the program, Michael. It's not always easy for us to hear about the budgetary crises of our state and what's facing us with this fiscal cliff, but you are standing tall for Alaska, even if maybe your governor doesn't always. And I just want to say thank you for continuing to fight the good fight, and do not get weary in well-doing, Michael. You're doing great work.
Well, I appreciate it, my friend. I love having my own words turned back against me. It's perfect stuff. Chris Story, you can find him at ilovehomeralaska.com. Thanks, buddy. I'll talk to you again soon. I'm going to keep all magnifying glasses away from you. All right, folks, we're out of time. Be kind, love one another, live well. Okay, well, that does it for me. I am done for today with this, and now I move on to the rest of the day. I've got a big list. I've got a big list of things to check off today, so we'll be getting to that here in just a little bit. Anyway, thank you guys for coming out and joining us. Don't forget to share the show And don't forget to check us out on Patreon if you haven't decided to help support the show for as little as a cup of coffee a month. You can help support the program. I would love that for you, please, and I would love that for me to help us keep going. All right, my friends, we will see you tomorrow. Have a good one.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.